Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. A few notes at the top. I have a major issue and my computer has broken down. So I am recording from another computer today. Not happy about it. No microphone, still away for now. Won't be microphone till March for me. Won't be the home setup till March. By then I'm going to have a new computer, I hope. That's a nightmare to begin with, Nick. But we haven't recorded in a while, so we thought we'd record, and it's kind of like a check-in type podcast, I would say, Nick. It's where we stand right now at the quarterback position for the New York Giants. Obviously, we head into this offseason well aware that this Giants team has issues across the board. It's not just quarterback. But we are also well aware, and I think you guys are too, that without quarterback, we could have a season like the last one or 2 years ago when it was Glennon and Fromm, where you're just a non-competitive team. So you can talk all you want about filling CB2 or CB1 or LB2 or whatever it may be, but quarterback one and quarterback two and just getting that quarterback room the way it needs to be is issue number one and priority number one for the Giants this offseason, as Joe Schoen has made clear. We're going to talk through a lot of concepts today, but the theme of the podcast is going to be ranking as we stand today. It's only February 24th. And before that, Nick and I will give what we've seen so far from this quarterback class, and that will lead us in a direction of where we're going to go. We may not get very specific with the prospects based on that, or we may, depending on how we feel and how much we've watched. It'll be different for Nick and I at this point. And then we're going to work through the scenarios of what we prefer to happen for the Giants right now, this offseason, and why, and really talk through everything. But before we do that, Nick, how you doing, my friend? It's been a while since I talked to you.
It's doing well, Dan. I'm doing well. And I love that you are matching your shirt with your hotel room.
Yeah. Listen, yes. Not many options out here, recording from a hotel room, no mic. So just working with what I got.
Yeah, you're doing well, man. We're killing it. Let's do it.
Thanks, buddy. All right. So where we're at right now, February 24th, just to set the tone real quick, the Giants have no quarterbacks on the roster. Unless I think they have DeVito maybe for something, or maybe he's even a free agent. I could care less.
He's a free agent, yeah.
Great.
Exclusive rights, though.
As I've said for the last 8 months, I have no interest in DeVito long-term for really any part. If he wants to keep being a practice squad guy, whatever, this is not somebody I think should be playing at the NFL level. It's a tough bar to play at the NFL level, especially consistently, right? Like he had his little stretch where he looked somewhat okay, I guess, though he was 41st in clean pocket EPA, so it's really not okay. And then this year he came back and was just disaster zone. So they're looking for new quarterbacks. Free agency, the draft, they're probably going to end up signing someone they're definitely going to end up signing someone, Nick. They might sign 2 quarterbacks. They might sign 1. Draft is maybe 1, I would say. Doubtfully 2, maybe 0. So that's the scenario we're looking at as far as what we're adding. As it stands today, Nick, given what you know about everything, and before you get into this, you maybe want to set the tone with why you're thinking along the way you're thinking regarding the coaching and the GM, because there's good conversation to be had there. What would be your ideal scenario, number 1 for the Giants this year? And realistic, obviously. It's not like we can just trade for Josh Allen. Yes.
Before we get into this, I think we should just acknowledge that the Giants did hire a running back coach. Liddell Betts is the Giants running back coach that just dropped a few moments ago. Joel Thomas rejoined the New Orleans Saints staff. So Liddell Betts, who we watched growing up, former Iowa Hawkeye, was with the Iowa Hawkeyes for a while. Iowa's had a couple good running backs cycle through Kirk Ferentz's program, and now we're looking at the New York Giants. They have Ferentz's kid. They got Liddell Betts on staff. We're starting to turn into the Iowa Hawkeyes out here. You and I have a mutual friend who would be very happy about that, Dan.
Yeah, don't know too much about Betts as a coach. Obviously, it's running back coach. Not much to offer from my end, but obviously the Iowa has a good running back coming out into this draft, Caleb Johnson, who in a lot of ways was, I don't want to say unknown, but unheralded going into this season from a draft standpoint. It really rose up draft boards in a big way. So hopefully Betts played a big role in his development.
Yes. So back to your question, Dan. What is my number 1 scenario? First, I want to lay this out. I don't have strong conviction for, I think, any of the scenarios we're about to talk about. I wish I did. There are certain players I like better than others. There are certain very high upside players who are going to cost the Giants some. And I want to lay this out because it's important. We are evaluating this through the lens and the reality that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are still employed. And I think you need to factor that into this entire situation, because if, say, the Giants draft a quarterback or Cam Ward at 3 overall, next year, the Giants might win 4 or 5 games, Brian Dable, Joe Shane, they might be out of a job. And then we're going to bring in new people with a quarterback entering his second year. And we've seen this happen before. A lot of times it does not end up working out. So I have some consternation with the Giants selecting a quarterback at 3 with this specific crop of quarterbacks from what I've seen so far, which is only a little bit. Okay. Still got a lot more film to watch. But last year, when you had Caleb and you had Drake and you had Jaden and even JJ, those quarterbacks, I think I'm going to evaluate much differently than these quarterbacks, where I'm going to feel, I should say, much differently about these quarterbacks from the little bit that I've seen so far. So we have to look at all of the options the Giants have at their disposal with the reality that Joe Shane is still our general manager. And neither you or I really wanted that to happen.
No.
And we know that, look, they're going to be a little bit desperate. They might make desperation moves. I don't want that to happen either, but we know they're going to try to be competitive. And I just want the Giants to be in a sound situation 2 years from now. I don't know who's going to be the general manager at that point. So I'm just looking for this roster to be competitive about as quick as possible, because I do not know if I have the conviction about the quarterbacks in this class either.
And you're right, because they put themselves in a very tough position with regards to they retained Shane and Dable going into what many would consider, though not contractually, I don't think, but many would consider be a lame duck year. Neither was extended. Joe Shane wasn't extended on his contract, right? Brian Dable wasn't extended on his contract there. Brought back, and no win mandate, but essentially it is as close to a win mandate as he gets, because you and I both know, Nick, if they don't win enough games this year, and it's like the last year was, they're both most likely gone, which puts us in the scenario that we projected months ago when both you and I said on this podcast, we do not think either of them should be retained. We thought they should move on from both of them, mostly because we don't want to put ourselves in a position like, one, what you said, playing with drafting and signing with desperation in their mind, both at quarterback and free agency. But more importantly, what happens if they lose this year and then they drafted a quarterback and they go into next offseason with a new GM and a new head coach, and he's in that awful position that no franchise wants to be in, where he's inheriting a quarterback that he did not draft, or they're inheriting a quarterback that they did not draft. That quarterback is only in year 2. And God forbid, you may have just given up a lot of draft capital, because one of the scenarios for the Giants that we're going to go over in this podcast is trading up from 3 to 1 to guarantee that they get the quarterback that they want in this draft class. And so there's a lot on the line for the Giants franchise this offseason, because and I know, in ideal world, Nick, let's say the Giants suck this year, but they did draft Ward or Sanders at 3 or 1. Let's say 3 in this scenario, because I'm going to say they would still have their first round pick. In an ideal scenario, they might go into next draft and say, F it, we'll pull the Cardinals move and we'll draft Arch Manning, or we'll draft, Nico, or whoever they deem to be a better prospect than that quarterback who didn't look that great, let's say, in year 1 for us. But realistically, very few teams make that decision. I'm not sold the Giants would be one of them, especially with John Mara as their owner. They've already, what is the proof in the pudding? The proof is we've already had them justify 6 years of Daniel Jones back to the well year after year. We just need to do this. We'll get him in offensive line. Even using the rhetoric of we ruined Daniel Jones, at no point really acknowledging that maybe he wasn't a good prospect. Maybe this is his doing in a lot of ways. Still no acknowledgement at any point from the Giants, which leads me to believe they will not be they don't want to move on from a quarterback after 1 year. So a lot is on the line based on that, I think, Nick. Obviously, it's a big scenario, but with all that said, and with what you've seen so far, and this will change, it's only February 24th. What would be your ideal scenario? And one more thing, actually, something you brought up. I do want to say, everyone comes to this podcast, Nick, maybe looking for us to give them answers or give them our strong opinion. I'm with you, dude. But it doesn't have to be that way. Things aren't always going to be that way. I don't have to have a conviction. You don't have to have a conviction. And I don't have a strong conviction on the best plan for quarterback this offseason. I want to make that clear. If there was Jaden Daniels staring me in the eyes at 1 overall, or Drake May or Caleb Williams, maybe I'd have a conviction. That conviction would be trade up to 1. If the Titans would seem more than willing to want to move down, then go ahead and trade up to 1. That's easy to have. Or if 3 are there, I could have said, sit at 3, see who falls to you. I'm good with any of those 3. That's easy to do. But I think the realistic situation is you could just look at the board and say, well, Sanders is the second-rated quarterback, Ward is the first-rated quarterback, or whatever order you want to put them in. That's great. We're in position to get one of them, or we trade up. You got it if you like someone. But why are they 2? Why are they 1? That's something I want to answer throughout this process, Nick, because I watch a lot of these quarterbacks that are supposed to be up there, and I'm not so sure that just because they are the next guy, they really should be taken at 3 overall. Last year, I was sure about that with those 3 quarterbacks. And you know what? Maybe you and I, or me, I'm just going to say me for this example. I don't really want to talk up for you on this, did underrate a Bo Nix. And maybe Bo Nix was worth passing on a Malik Neighbors for and drafting at 6. I think time will tell on that. And I don't think I may remain anywhere sold on a quarterback after 1 year. Defense coordinator still need to get tape on him. He also was a nice fit for Sean Payton. Same could be for Penix. Same could be for JJ McCarthy. We don't know yet. We could have been wrong on that. But it's also, there's times where just because a quarterback is pushed up into that range doesn't mean that he belongs in that range. And we're going to explore that as we go throughout draft season.
Absolutely. Now, let's come up with, I think, my number one.
Yeah, what's your number one?
I want the New York Giants to finally fix this quarterback conundrum, this quarterback issue that they found themselves in since Eli Manning has retired. I think the easiest way, the best way to do that is to swing for the fences and to go and trade for someone like Matt Stafford. Now, this always is going to come down to what is the compensation. I'm not parting ways with the 34th overall pick to do this. And maybe the Giants would have to surrender that. I'm not interested in that. But I am interested in 2 threes with the possibility of next year's 2026's 3 being bumped up to a 2. That's a conditional. I'm interested in that based on whatever incentive. Stafford plays over 50%, over 70% of the snaps, and the Giants make the playoffs. And the reason why is because you and I, since the start of this podcast, we have talked about the importance of the quarterback position. Now, this is a 37-year-old quarterback. He's had some injuries in his past that needs to be factored in. And I know that there is desperation associated with this because of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll's eagerness and necessity to win. But at the same time, I know Matt Stafford will make this roster competitive. This offensive line is better than the Rams offensive line. Malik Neighbors is, there's probably an argument there. Is he better than Puka Nacua? But Malik Neighbors has top 5 upside. And I look at Jalen Hyatt and I look at Wan'Dale Robinson and Theo Johnson and Tyrone Tracy. And I know that offense will be competent and respectable with a healthy Matt Stafford back there. And if it's just parting ways with 2 threes in order to achieve that and get competent football, I'm interested in that. And I know this isn't a long-term fix. I'm aware of that. We can either do this or again, to go back, we have Joe Schoen and we have Brian Daboll, and this could be a lame duck year. We could either do this, be competitive, and then see where the cards fall and see what the Giants can do moving forward with a competent offense as we retool and rework the defense, possibly invest in somebody like a Travis Hunter, possibly invest in somebody like an Abdul Carter and get another blue chip prospect at 3rd overall. Or if they love Cam Ward and he falls there, you can go Cam Ward and still get that quarterback. But your room now is solidified. And that biggest issue that we've been talking about for 6 years now, Dan, is rectified with this addition. So color me very interested. No, it's not a long-term issue. It buys time to figure out the quarterback position long-term. I'm still very, very intrigued with the Giants investing maybe 34 in a quarterback they love, or maybe another round 3 and possibly even signing another free agent. But if you're telling me we can get a top 10 quarterback on this roster after watching Daniel Jones for the last 6 years, I'm interested in that. And I think if I had to choose right now, that's my number one option for the compensation I laid out.
Yeah. And I think, some might say, well, look, the Jets went a 2 and a conditional 3 that could be a 2 for Rodgers. Why wouldn't that be the same compensation for Stafford? In which case the Giants would have to give up their 34th overall pick, which I think takes you out of the mix for it. I think that's fair for you to say, because that 34th pick is going to be like a first round pick, especially if the Giants go trenches there, Nick. If they go D-line, it's going to be a guy who's a first round level caliber player at D-line, which they desperately need, right? Or there could be a receiver there that's worth it. I wouldn't want to go that direction, but O-line could be in play there. There are trench players that could really be difference makers for this offense. And you can and should be able to hit at 34 overall with a potential all-pro player. Xavier McKinney was 34. He was an all-pro player, last year he was an all-pro player. And the Giants have hit on, throughout their years, they've hit on countless interior defensive linemen with those mid-round picks. Even, in a sense, 34. So just to kind of walk that back, why is it possible they might not have to give that pickup? Well, it's possible they might not have to give that pickup because it's possible that Stafford's market isn't that robust right now. So, for example, here are some teams that are rumored to be interested in Stafford. Minnesota, there's no actual tie to that. It's just an idea that's put out there. Now, Minnesota is a team that drafted J.J. McCarthy last year. If they trade for Matthew Stafford and sign him to a 2-year contract with fully guaranteed money, that means J.J. McCarthy is not playing football until year 4 of his rookie contract at the very earliest. That's possible. The Packers did that. But it's also more likely, I think, that a coach who's done a really good job, Kevin O'Connell, with just about every quarterback that's walked in there, from Nick Mullins to Josh Dobbs to Sam Darnold, looks at it and says, I drafted JJ for a reason. He showed me a lot in training camp. Remember, all the training camp reports about McCarthy were glowing. 20 touchdowns to no interceptions. And then kind of backed it up in the preseason. And you might want to just move forward with that. So there's nothing there. Steelers, heavily rumored to be interested in Stafford. That's the Giants' biggest competition, I think, for Matt.
And I think that's a real competition, too.
I think it's real competition.
Yeah.
Outside of those teams, the Giants, I think, have the edge. They have Malik Neighbors. They have the New York market. What do the Titans have to offer? What do the Raiders have to offer Matthew Stafford?
So another reason why I'm more invested in the idea of Matthew Stafford is I look at this roster. Look, this roster does have holes on it, but there are key blue chip building blocks on this roster that I don't want to just be wasted. I look at somebody like Dexter Lawrence. I look at somebody like Andrew Thomas. You still have Malik Neighbors on a cost-effective contract. You bring these guys in. There's a lot of other like ancillary pieces that I think have a lot of utility for this roster that if you insert a good quarterback, this team could possibly compete for the playoffs. Now, is it winning the Super Bowl? Probably not, right? But this is bigger than a baby step at this point, right? Like you're taking a toddler step or a preteen step, getting a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, inserting him onto this offense as I laid out before, with adding blue chip possibly talent through the draft to the defense. If the Giants can stay a little bit more healthy, they could win 9-10 games possibly. Like I know that sounds crazy because how low this team is, but it completely flips the narrative and script. If Stafford does stay healthy, again, he's 37 and his arm talent does not diminish, which there were no signs on tape last year that his arm talent was diminishing through everything that I've seen. So those are some of the reasons why I'm interested in this option. There are a couple other ones I want to go through that really compete with this because they're just so much cheaper and the compensation is the thing that really draws me back. But Dan, we're talking about getting a future Hall of Famer who still has the talent that he's had 5 years ago, right? Who still has all of those traits. Like he's still playing at a high level right now. And you look at what the Eagles said, a lot of these Eagles players, I think it was Darius Slay, talking, just raving about the Rams after it's like the one team that almost beat us was the Los Angeles Rams. And the engine of that team was freaking Matt Stafford at this point. And if we could take advantage of the fact that those two sides, the Rams organization and Matt Stafford, cannot see eye to eye, and he can come here and we can retool his contract and give him what he needs, but not overspend to the point where it's going to absolutely cripple us long-term, I don't see necessarily a huge reason not to at least entertain that.
Me either. And I will say this, as far as what you said goes, I watched a lot of tape of Stafford after these rumors started, and I know you did as well, because that's just what we would do naturally as fans, but also for the podcast. It's fun to watch and think about, what would this look like with like Neighbors? What would this look like with Jalen Hyatt when I watch some of those Tutu Atwell plays, right? What would this look like with Theo Johnson when I watch some of those Higbee targets? What would this look like with a lot of these players? And I think it's important to note, because you mentioned the arm talent is still about where it was, or if not as good as it was. I think it's important to note that from the film that I watched, Nick, the processing pre to post snap and the anticipation is still at that same level. To me, that's even more important, because I think about the old Dave Gettleman line, right? I watched the Eagles game. Eli's arm is the same it was. And Eli's arm might have been the same as it was for those final years, but Eli's anticipation and his processing went way down in those final years. And it was a big reason, because you can look at the numbers that back this up. During Eli, one of the biggest things that never gets mentioned with Eli Manning's Hall of Fame case, Nick, is that during his time, his stretch of, it was a certain stretch, I believe it tailed off at the end to make my point. He had the third lowest sack rate. And this is a quarterback with no mobility at all, basically. And why did he have the third lowest sack rate? Because he processed pre to post and got rid of the football, Eli Manning. And that's a stat. That's a him stat. It's obviously not an offensive line stat. With one of the worst offensive lines you can imagine for a quarterback over his career, with the exception of 3 years, Eli Manning had the third lowest sack percentage. Why is that? Him processing. Similar with Aaron Rodgers. We saw it in that Packers-Giants game in 2022. His anticipation doesn't look the same. I talked to a Jets guy this offseason who covers his team, and I was like, what happened with the Jets? Like, why did they not win football games? I look at Aaron Rodgers' stats. It looks pretty good. They had that defense, and he's like, Rodgers checked down a lot. Rodgers threw underneath a lot. Rodgers didn't challenge deep vertical intermediate areas a lot. Stafford still does that. Stafford still has that level of pre to post snap anticipation and processing that's at that elite level. And it's the biggest reason why I'm interested in him, Nick. And that's number one for me. Now, number two, as far as Stafford goes, is I don't think we need to look at this as a 1-year thing, right? In year one, maybe Matt Stafford can make us a 9-10 win team. I'll make my case in a moment for why I think that is possible. But what about in year two? No one's talking about that second year he'd have with Brian Daboll in the system if they do win 6, 7, 8, or let's say 7, 8, 9 games this first year with Stafford. Now we're talking about the team has gone through major upgrades. It's at a point where I believe if he's still playing at the level he's played these last 2 seasons, and he'd have to carry that over to his age 39 season, obviously, but if he's still playing at that level, he could win you something real. I don't look at that Rams team that won a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford and look at that roster because I went back and looked at it. I don't personally see anything that special. And I'll tell you what, Nick, and this is the biggest thing for me. I don't believe football is won and lost on paper. I don't think you need to go through every of those 53 positions, 53-man roster, go through every of those 22 starters and be like, cornerback one's great, A, cornerback two. Like, I just don't think you need it. I don't think it works like that. I think it's trenches and it's quarterback. And the rest of it falls into place. You want playmakers. You want a Neighbors. You want these guys or like a Travis Hunter who can pick six and flip a game. Playmakers are important too. But I don't really think corners are that important when your defensive line is dominating, to be completely honest. And I'm not so sure running backs are that important when your offensive line is dominating, to be completely honest. And I'm not so sure linebackers are even really that important. They are, but they're not when your defensive line is dominating. It's a lot easier to play the position in that point. Safeties as well. You really look at this game. And you could say the same for, you obviously don't want to have, what's his name? I was thinking of like Todd Pinkston out there at wide receiver. It's not going to help you if you have no speed on the field.
No one thought Todd Pinkston was going to be taking strays on this podcast.
He's taking strays on this pod. But a lot of these guys I'm thinking of a worse guy. It wasn't Freddie Mitchell. There was one like super big bust. Let's use J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. You don't want J.J. Arcega-Whiteside who can't separate at all and get off press or do anything on the football field. But with what the Giants already have in their playmaker and skill positions on the offense side of the ball, you don't need too much if your quarterback is making the right decisions and has the arm talent to fit it.
No, 100%, man. And look, the Giants, they have a murderous row in 2025.
Right.
Which also leads me to be like, should this just be a punt year in general, right? Which is kind of a dumb way, a lazy way to look at this. And the organization would never do that. But it would be that if the Giants draft a quarterback and just say, hey, you're going to be the starter. Like I don't think they would win too many games going up against the AFC West and the NFC North, which is their opponents these next years. So that also gives me a little bit of an uneasy feeling, but getting Stafford would allow this team to immediately compete. And it just always comes down, as we already said, to that compensation. This episode is brought to you by Skims. Get your hands on the best underwear in the land. Look, I'm sure, gentlemen, you're a lot like me. You don't want your fit to be too compact, nor do you want to be swinging around like you're trying to destroy a piñata. You want everything in place. Comfort on a cloud with no ride-up. That is the ideal situation, and Skims provides that situation for us, gentlemen. They sent me a few pairs. I wear them to work. I wear them while I'm working out, and they are exactly what I'm looking for in my underwear. And Christmas is right around the corner. So grab a pair of Skims for someone in your life. Maybe that someone is you, and you want that comfortable underwear for your whole situation down there. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's SKIMS.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. So visit skims.com to check that out and maximize your draw's comfortability.
Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. Every man knows the unbeatable feeling of a fresh barbershop shave. Now, what if I told you that you no longer have to wait weeks or even months between appointments to experience it? Introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver, the game-changing tool that brings the luxury of professional shave right into your home. Whether you're after that daily silky smooth finish or prefer to maintain a rugged 5 o'clock shadow, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is your go-to for precision and style every time. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code Big Blue for 20% off. Gentlemen, this has changed the grooming game for me, and I highly recommend it for you. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com.
Because, Nick, I always come back to those first 5-6 weeks, whatever it was, the Giants season before the injuries ruined their season. And I think about, look at it. I look at our notes, dude. I look at the all 22 notes, and I see freaking high numbers that we never gave on a 1 to 10 scale for the Giants pass blocking, and at times the run blocking. The offensive line was playing really, really good football those first 5-6 weeks before Thomas got injured. They had to shuffle everything around. The defensive line was dominating. They were dominating games. They took over that Bengals game in a really big way. And the Giants were a competitive football team those first 5-6 weeks, despite not having a quarterback who could really do much but what was really easy. He could make it. I mean, look, the Seattle game, he had a good game. Even then, man, it's not like we're watching Stafford on tape, right? It's not, we weren't really watching a quarterback who's taking over a game. He made a few good plays. One of them, Slayton was pretty open. The other one, he kind of looked off the coverage quick and then just hit a big shot down the right side where the safety wasn't there. But overall, he wasn't dropping back every play from the gun and really ripping intermediates. And so despite really having average quarterback play at times and bad quarterback play at times, man. Like the Dallas game was really bad. The Cincinnati game was really bad. Like you could say, okay, look, he hit these 6-yard passes underneath. It's not that bad. But with what they were doing, those defenses, there were areas of the field to be attacked, and he just simply couldn't attack those. And when he finally did, he was way off in the Bengals game and had like 3 horrible misses with tons of space. So it's like in the Dallas game, we don't even need to go. I mean, the open receivers in the Dallas game on the vertical path that just were missed was insane. It cost them the game, literally. So I look at that and I'm like, would Stafford take this team to 9 wins? I almost, at minimum, I almost feel very confident about that, Nick, as I move forward. So yeah, man, that's for me. It's maybe it's short-term thinking. Maybe it's the idea of let's build something in year 1 that we can carry over to year 2. Maybe it's I don't want to watch these receivers' development completely get wasted another year, or maybe it's just desperation to some extent, which I will admit. But this is a quarterback who is not suffering from the Aaron Rodgers drop-off in anticipation and processing that I think is clear, or the Eli drop-off in that regard. And I think he could still play at a really high level.
Yeah, there's no way that they're not going to make some sort of desperate move, right? Like at this point, like they know their seat is
everyone's desperate. Yeah,
every move is going to be desperate. I think drafting one of the Shadur Sanders at 3 is a desperation move, just because you need to get a quarterback if you're passing up some of these other blue chip options. So the whole like desperation thing, I understand why we're saying it, and I think there's a lot of merit to it. But at the same time, you're not going and just getting some nobody. You're getting somebody who is possibly a top 10 quarterback, and actually he is a top 10 quarterback in the league, right? Yes, he's a little bit older, but again, man, we've already rehashed it at this point. Like this to me it's a move that will make this team competitive. And we haven't watched competitive football other than that 2022 season for almost a decade, Dan. And that's how down bad the New York Giants are. And if you're telling me we can go and get somebody like that for the 2-3s and you're not giving up 34, yes, I'm interested, of course.
Now, just to round it out before I give my top scenario that I would want at quarterback, would your scenario involve drafting a quarterback at any point? And if so, what round would be ideal for you?
Yes, so I need to watch these mid-round quarterbacks, right? But I would entertain 34. Ideally, I want to spend probably 34 on a defensive lineman if the Giants don't do that at 3, or the Giants could trade down at 3 if somebody really wants one of those players. If Hunter, because I'm in love with the college. I mean, everybody is, but that kid is just insane. He could solve so many issues for the Giants, and he's just such a freaking smart player. That's like probably the thing I love most about him. I just watched like 2 games of Colorado's defense, and I'm like, bro, this guy, he could do so much for your cornerback room. And then you watch the game with Shador, and it's just like Shador is just lobbing these up to him, and he could just go up and get it. So he's a true transcendent.
Lobbing him up, or he's just throwing quick screen to him.
Yeah, transcendent type of player. And the thought of him with Malik Neighbors in certain packages on offense just makes me salivate. So I wouldn't want to pass up on him, but you could also trade down and then just get more picks and replenish the picks that you traded from the Matthew Stafford to get Matthew Stafford. So I look at it, Dan, I am not opposed to getting somebody at 34, but I haven't watched Jackson Dart yet, and he's the name. So I want to reserve my judgment on that, but I'm not opposed to it if the Giants feel like they can identify somebody who's going to be their long-term solution going forward and get him a little bit later, or at least has the potential to. Like if he's not a first-round prospect and they just love somebody and he's like a day 3 prospect and you get him in the 3rd round or something, I'm certainly open to that, because fixing the quarterback room is the most important thing the New York Giants are going to do this offseason by far. They neglected it for years. They finally paid the piper. They faced the music. They understood, hey, Daniel Jones isn't it. We're moving on. Drew Lock's not there. Tommy DeVito is an exclusive rights free agent. So let's sign 2 guys, draft somebody if you need to, but let's fix this just absolute disgusting wart that has been on the backside of our ass for how long at this point, Dan? We need to do that, and that's where I'm at. And I think Matt Stafford would be the top of that. And then you could sign somebody else, and you can draft somebody in the mid rounds as well. Fix the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm with you when it comes to pouring resources into position. I'll say this: the Giants haven't historically really used that much capital in the middle rounds and the later rounds at the quarterback position. Davis Webb comes to mind as a 3rd round pick. Andre Woodson at one point was a 4th round pick.
Rhett Bomar, baby.
Rhett Bomar was a pick out of Kentucky, I believe, but they really haven't gone this route. What was it?
That was Woodson was out of Kentucky.
Woodson was Kentucky. I don't remember where Bomar was. Louisville, maybe?
Rhett Bomar was, I'm just looking it up.
Curious.
He went to Oklahoma and Sam Houston State.
Sam Houston State. Now I remember that.
Yes.
But they haven't done that, but it's something that I'm interested in, because I'm always looking to get talent in this quarterback room. Even if you're developing them as a long-term 2, I still think it's a valuable pick, as we saw for last year, because that means you don't have to turn to Locke and DeVito, guys who just really have no clue with the system. They can't, like Locke just couldn't operate that system. I think that was clear from what you saw in training camp and what we saw on tape. It finally got a little bit better at the end, and unfortunately he won that Colts game because of it, but he was not up to speed. And DeVito knew the system, but can't play football at the NFL level.
That's I was just about to say that. DeVito knew the system, and that's something that Dable has praised him for, but I just think there are traits that he's lacking when it comes to being a starter in the league, which are
plenty of traits that he's lacking, pretty much all of the traits for being a starter. And that's not a knock on him. It's the reality of the situation. They really are positioned to play in the NFL, and there's an insanely high bar of, barrier of entry. And that's why we're in these positions and why a lot of teams are. But anyway, with all of that said, I would say my number 1 scenario, Nick, is the draft goes differently than some people plan. And I don't think it's as different anymore. At first, people were like, oh, this is no chance of happening. But we remember pretty clearly this isn't a Jaden Daniels draft. This isn't the draft like last year. And so with that in mind, the Titans and the Browns, they don't find trade partners for 1 and 2, because no one's interested really in trading up for these quarterbacks. They kind of view them as pieces they might be willing to take if they fall to their pick, but not guys that you trade up for. And that's where I'm at with this class, including my QB1 in this class. I like the idea of taking him at 3 a lot for one of these guys, but I don't love the idea of trading up. And 1 and 2, Nick, goes Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, which I could honestly see happening. I really could. And so my ideal scenario is that's how the draft falls, and the Giants draft Cam Ward at 3 and sign Jameis Winston in free agency as their veteran quarterback. I think the fit makes sense for a lot of reasons to sign Jameis. If you are going to draft Ward, there are other options, but I think Jameis makes the most sense. And Jameis, to me, is somebody you could put in, start right away, and he can help these wide receivers maximizing their potential. We saw that with what he did with Cedric Tillman last year with the Browns. We saw that with what he did with Eli Moore, Jerry Jeudy especially, even Njoku. Their entire production went up across the board at the wide receiver position. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say you're really relying, if you're Joe Schoen, on what you're hearing from the Browns and the Titans camps to make this, and that nobody's going to be trading up. You would really need to have a firm grasp on how the league is viewing Cam Ward in order to do this, lest it's just going to be Jameis Winston as your starting quarterback if Cam Ward does go 1 or 2.
Right. In which scenario, I'm not totally just losing my mind over it.
Neither am I, because I do love Jameis. Didn't mean to cut you off, but how does Joe Schoen and Brian? Because Jameis, we're looking at what is he going to sign? Like a $6 to $8 million, maybe 10,
maybe more, 10 to 12. Maybe.
I think Spotrac has it at 5. I think that's just a little bit too low. But it's going to be inexpensive, and that really interests me because I think Jameis, look, he is a roller coaster. He is an absolute roller coaster, and I am for it. I am for the excitement, but he will falter and crash at some point. And I don't know if Joe Schoen and Brian Dable would want to roll the dice on that. too much. And it also like just gives me a little bit of hesitation because say they went this route and Cam Ward goes 1 or 2, someone leapfrogs the Giants, or the Giants get desperate and trade up to 1 to make sure they get Cam Ward. That's a lot of assets they're giving up just to do that. Or if Cam Ward goes 1 or 2, and then they're like, you know what, we'll take Shedeur. And look, I've only watched the one game of Shedeur, but it doesn't seem like he would be the highest rated player or even close to that, or he would even be in consideration if this was last year's draft class. Right. So that's my one, not gripe, but that's my one point I want to make about like this scenario is like, you really need to understand how these other teams are valuing these quarterbacks.
Yeah. And that's a good point to make. This scenario that I'm presenting as my ideal scenario comes with a lot more risk, first of all, and a lot more uncertainty, at least as it applies to 2025. That's what is in mind for me. Because as we move forward, this one also to me comes with the least risk. The Stafford one comes with risk. He's old. He's injured. He's been injured at times. You're giving him a lot of guaranteed money. Trading up for a quarterback comes with a lot of risk. You're giving up your 2026 first round pick. You take yourself out of that quarterback market. But this scenario, as far as, like you said, let's say Ward does go 1 or 2 and let's say it was my scenario right now, Nick, where, I'm not going to make this definitive, but as it stands right now, Ward is probably the only quarterback I would take in the top 3 of this draft class. And I'm about to explain why he's my number 1 option. But in that scenario, you could get stuck with just Jameis, which again, puts you in a bad position for 2025. And maybe that's not ideal for Shane. Maybe it's not ideal for Dable, Nick, but it may be ideal for me. And it may be ideal for what I think the Giants' best plan is going forward, because I don't really need to rush quarterback this year. For me, this year's draft is about, or this year's offseason, I should say, as far as the quarterback position goes, my number 1 priority, Nick, is do not waste these wide receivers. And the only way to not waste these wide receivers is by getting a quarterback in here who can throw with some level of anticipation and who will challenge all areas of the field. The only quarterbacks in free agency who will do that are Stafford, Rodgers, and Jameis. And from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing, and I did not watch the tape, but I remember it from that Giants game in 2022, Rodgers is no longer challenging all areas of the field at a good pace. We've seen him still hit some big throws this year but it wasn't often. And it was the main reason, according to the Jets people that I've talked to, why the Jets were not a competitive football team this year. So I don't feel confident there either, to be completely honest with you. And as far as Cousins goes, who's another option we'll talk about, we'll see. If the arm is shot, he's not going to be able to challenge those levels of field. He's going to check down. He's going to lose his confidence. So why I think that drafting Ward at 3 and signing James would be my ideal scenario for quarterback for this offseason is, no, I don't have the same feeling about Ward that I did Drake May, my number 1 conviction last year. No, I don't have the same feeling with Jaden Daniels or with Caleb Williams. But I do think that Cam Ward would be my quarterback 4 if we combine the last 2 classes. And I do think he reaches the barrier, for me at least, of where and maybe it's just slightly over that, Nick, but it's that barrier of I'm willing to pass up on a Travis Hunter. And that's the opportunity cost I know I'm losing out on. And I'm willing to pass up on a Mason Graham, who'd be great for our trenches. And I'm willing to pass up on an Abdul Carter, who could be a freak at the NFL level, Micah Parsons level, for a player like that, because of a lot of things and I'll tell you the main reasons. Why? So because I've watched a lot of Cam Ward tape and I've watched a lot of Sanders tape and I've watched a little bit of Tyler Shuck, and that's about where I'm at. I watched 1 game of McCord. I watched 1 game of Dart. That's not 1 game of a quarterback is not nearly enough for me to feel anywhere confident on what they could be. But as far as Ward goes, who I have watched a lot of tape of, Nick, it's not the usual feeling of, excitement I get for some of these quarterbacks like a May or like a Jaden or some of these guys. There are still mistakes on his tape. But the highs are really high. And what he brings to the NFL level are 2 things that I think could make him a really good quarterback at the NFL level. The first one for me is in the gotta have it moments. He seems to come up big a lot. And maybe that's the factor that none of us can explain, dude. But there are plays where the pocket is broken. And some of them might be on him, right? I don't know who called the protections at Miami, him or his center. But there are moments where the blitz comes and he may not see it. He gets out of it and he flips the ball to his back, who then takes his tight end, who then takes it for a first down against Virginia Tech. And you'll see that throughout a lot of these games. Miami is not always playing with a lead, or even if they are playing with a lead, they lose a lead sometimes and they have to play comeback mode because their defense was horrible. And he came up big in a lot of these spots. That's number 1. But number 2 for me is that in the red zone, I believe that Cam Ward is a weapon right now and will be a weapon moving forward at the NFL level, because his ability in the red zone to change the trajectory and arm angles on his throws is something that I don't see a lot. I didn't see it with Jaden. I didn't see it with Drake May. I see it sometimes with them, of course, but I didn't see it as consistently as I see it with Cam Ward. He does an insane job of putting touch and trajectory on his passes in the red zone, and it allows him to find solutions that just shouldn't be there in the red zone, that a lot of these quarterbacks who just have the same throwing motion all the time are unable to find. And even those quarterbacks who try to change their arm slots in the red zone, some of them try to change their arm slots, and I watch them sail it, dude. They can't get that ball to come down. Cam Ward can change that arm slot and get that ball to go up and down into the receiver where he can extend, tap his toes, and make insane plays for touchdowns that, to me, are quarterback driven. Yeah, the receiver may tap his toes in and extend and make what looks like a sick catch. But to me, it's the quarterback getting that ball up and down by changing his arm slot. And Cam Ward does that consistently on his tape. He also has moments where he'll layer a throw outside the numbers. I also feel like when I watch him, dude, versus a lot of these quarterbacks, especially comparing him to like Shador, who's supposed to be this great, accurate, Brady-like processor, I think Cam Ward sees the field better than Shador. I see Cam Ward going off the play side and coming to the backside a lot more than I saw Shador do it personally. I see Cam Ward making some of these anticipatory throws, dude, at different levels, wow moments of anticipatory throws, and then he changes pace on the ball too. Like if he needs to, he will ground himself and stick a throw, an anticipatory throw. He did it against Virginia Tech. I'm bringing up this game. It's one of my favorite games of him, where there was an inside breaker, and I put it on Twitter a while ago, and he threw that well before the receiver got out of his break and into a window that he had to be thrown based on where the defenders were, and he put extra zip on that. He has arm talent, a lot of it. He can throw off platform, but he could also step into throws and really rip it. He's inaccurate at times. He misses a lot of throws. I personally think it's funny because last year there was so much made, Nick, of the throws Drake May misses. I think I watch a lot more misses from Cam Ward than I watch from Drake May. Now,
May did have a lot of misses. I just like
they both have a lot of
and
misses.
We talked about it, but like to me, it's like the throws that he makes. Like I don't know, you can correct me. I've only seen one game of Cam Ward on the All 22, but the throws that Drake May made consistently, it was just like I don't care that he misses these other throws. We'll figure it out.
Ward has some of those, which is why it's exciting me. Not as many as May.
Not as many.
Not the same arm. It's that those three arms, Caleb, Drake, and Jaden. Those were different level arm talents. That's just the reality of the situation. But Ward has those throws too, in my opinion, at least, by the way. I know that's controversial too. I said once a few months ago that Cam Ward doesn't have elite arm talent. And like to me, elite is like Josh Allen, Mahomes, like that level. And people thought that was crazy that I said he didn't have elite arm talent. I know you've only watched one game, but I know you probably agree with me. That's not that level of arm talent.
Okay, so let's do this then. Matt Stafford is 37 years old. Who has better arm talent?
Matt Stafford, without even doubt. If you don't believe that and you watch it, that's on you, and I can't really go any further. I think when you can watch these guys on tape back to back, you should be able to see it, and it's not controversial or anything. Yeah. But if you don't, that's fine. It's your opinion. This is my opinion.
Here's one that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Sam Darnold or Cam Ward?
Cam Ward.
Okay, that's it.
I like Cam Ward's arm talent better. I do.
I think Darnold's got terrible, by the way. I think Darnold's got underrated arm talent.
He does.
Darnold's issues are in his head.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
maybe that's unfair to say that. I think they also have very similar arm talent, I would say. Mm-hmm. But I like Cam Ward's arm talent more in the red zone. I think it's a weapon. I think it's a real big weapon. I think Darnold might be better on the vertical plane, potentially, just from an accuracy standpoint, a ball placement standpoint. But Cam Ward makes a lot of big throws. And again, it's the processing that I heard was supposed to be the Shador thing. I watched those two, and I feel like I see more anticipatory throws and just whole shots from Ward and just coming off the play side to the backside where he's like, wow, this is a different level of processing. And I'm going to watch more Sanders, and the more you watch, you can see some things you like. But that would be my ideal scenario. Draft Ward at 3, sign Jameis Winston. And I could put anyone in the sign bucket. Jameis would just be my preference at quarterback. All right, Nick. Well, we went on a lot longer than I thought on each of our number one ideal scenarios for quarterback. So let's actually table talk for our second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, our backup scenarios. We'll call this the ideal plan and then our backup plan for quarterback when we get to the next episode. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Big Blue Banter podcast. Keep it locked and loaded. Things can change. Things are going to move fast. We're almost at free agency, so then we're going to be doing a lot of content around that. We're still a little light right now on the NFL cycle, but the combine is coming. We'll have a recap of that next week as well. And look, if anything happens with Stafford, that news or anything like that, you'll hear from us and our reaction as well. So please, at a dry time like this, help us out. We need your help. hit the like button, comment, get things going. Probably going to try to do something interactive like a mailbag for the end of this week so we can get you guys get going with some kind of conversations, things like that. But yeah, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and please leave a comment. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.